Today we're talking Ronnie James Dio, Ritchie Blackmore, Rainbow. This is an article called Stargazer, Where Was Your Star, from Shane O'Neill. This is from The Chug. Let's get into it. Quote, "We're not standing for this," unquote. Rainbow's Ritchie Blackmore flinches as a sharp jab lands in his back. He's kneeling in front of his amp, trying to dial in a sound. He turns. Ronnie James Dio and drummer Cozy Powell stand over him. Dio holds up a copy of Circus magazine. Ritchie Blackmore on the cover. Alone. Blackmore is defiant. He claims to know nothing about the cover. But this wasn't the first time Dio had been slighted by Blackmore. When Rainbow's first album was due to be released, Blackmore and Dio had agreed that the group would be called the somewhat long-winded Ritchie Blackmore and Ronnie James Dio's Rainbow. But when the first album came out, there it was, Ritchie Blackmore's Rainbow. Did this become a bone of contention between us? Well, seeing as I had co-written all the songs and sung them, the short answer would be yes. But what you gonna do? Cry about it? I'm just gonna interject here. Ritchie Blackmore was a name. Ronnie James Dio had been the lead singer of Elf. He was not the Dio that we know. He was not the Dio who would go on to front Black Sabbath and Heaven and Hell and his own incredibly successful solo band. He was just this short guy who sang in a band. And granted, Ritchie Blackmore's Rainbow literally was the band Elf with Ritchie Blackmore on the first album. How Ronnie James Dio expected his name to be in it is beyond me at that point, sincerely. I mean, now when we think of Rainbow, they're synonymous with each other. But at the time, it made no sense. But that's just me. We'll continue with the article. As Dio stands over him, holding the magazine cover in front of his face, Blackmore knows Rainbow is coming to an end. That particular incarnation of the band, at least. The question is, how did these two legends of heavy music end up here? Stargazer is the fifth track on Rainbow Rising, the second album released in '76, regarded as Rainbow's masterpiece. The song runs 8.5 minutes and features the Munich Philharmonic Orchestra. Rolling Stone would later call it Ronnie James Dio's finest vocal performance on record. It's kind of hard to argue with that. The song is about a slave who builds a tower for a man who wants to fly. The man who wrote the lyrics knew what that felt like. See, by 1975, Ritchie Blackmore was looking for a new project, something he could literally put his name on. Deep Purple, the band he'd co-founded in '68, had drifted towards rock-funk fusion, and Blackmore wanted something darker, more edgier. While still on tour with Deep Purple, he began recording music with Ronnie James Dio, a frontman of a small American band called Elf. Together with other members of Dio's band, Blackmore and Dio recorded the first Rainbow album in secret. Quote, he decided he would record the song Black Sheep without Purple, partly because he was so stubborn and partly just to piss off Purple, I think. Unquote. That was from Ronnie James Dio book Rainbow in the Dark. When the tour ended, Blackmore told Deep Purple, "Hey, I'm leaving." Blackmore rebuilt Rainbow with musicians of his choosing, Cozy Powell on drums, Jimmy Bain on bass, and Tony Carey on keyboard. Ronnie James Dio was the one constant moving forward, but the terms were always Blackmore's. Quote, Ritchie was the boss of the band. I did respect Ritchie's opinion and judgment, but it was not a very democratic situation at all, unquote. Ronnie James Dio. Now, to put in perspective, this is from me, outside of the article, to put in perspective what I meant by it, I think it's ridiculous that Dio wanted his name attached to the Rainbow name. It should be understood that Ronnie James Dio was born Ronald, Padavona, in this little Italian Catholic community up in Cortland, New York. And he never took a singing lesson in his life. He learned everything from the 4 hours his father made him spend every day, Sundays included, learning the trumpet from age 6. See, the trumpet would eventually give him the diaphragm and breath control to carry an 8.5-minute epic without ever fading. But Dio's first choice was not to be a vocalist. In his earliest bands, the Vegas Kings, Ronnie and the Redcaps, he played guitar. It was in the latter that he discovered his latent talent. Quote, "To our collective surprise, mine most of all, as soon as I opened my mouth and started to sing, you could hear it was something I could do, and quite easily," unquote. That's from Ronnie's book, Rainbow in the Dark. What followed was nearly 2 decades of grind. The Vegas Kings, Ronnie and the Redcaps, and of course Elf, a career that kept almost breaking through but never quite did. Crazily enough, he finally got his breaks at 33 years old, which is, archaic in rock and roll circles, when Rainbow Rising was recorded on Ritchie Blackmore's terms. See, Dio describes Stargazer as a morality tale told from the standpoint of a slave in ancient Egypt, a theme that shows up fairly often in Dio songs. A wizard, an astronomer obsessed with the idea of flying, enslaves a vast army and puts them to work. The task is simple and impossible. Build a tower of stone tall enough to launch a man into the sky. The people labor in heat and rain, under whips and chains, sustained by one thin thread of hope that when the tower is finished, they will finally get to watch him fly. But when the wizard makes it to the top, he falls instead of rising. All that's left is blood in the sand. The central riff of Stargazer wasn't originally written on guitar. Blackmore had been tinkering around with a cello. One of the most iconic early heavy metal riffs was written by a guitarist on an instrument he barely knew how to play. The song is announced by Cozy Powell's drum intro, a statement in itself. Quote, "I had to work out all these little things that had been copied to death since, but I am very proud of it," unquote. That's Cozy Powell. The song is built on 2 related scales. The harmonic minor runs through Dio's vocal lines and anchors the opening of Blackmore's solo. It's the scale most associated with Middle Eastern music. The B Phrygian is dominant, what Blackmore called his half-Turkish scale, technically the 5th mode of E harmonic minor, which defines the phrasing of the solo. Together, they create the song's unmistakably exotic atmosphere. The guitar solo itself establishes the tower's foundation, the labor, the scale of what's being built. As it climbs, the pitch grows, more distorted, more torturous, mirroring the suffering of the men doing the building. Blackmore and Dio's vocal lines share note choices throughout the song. The guitar, it becomes another voice, echoing Dio's melodic vocal phrasing. The first 10 bars build, they rise, but never quite resolve. Then Blackmore begins a chromatic climb towards the peak. The wizard's inevitable fall is first announced by guitar. Rolling Stone called Dio's performance on Stargazer, like I said before, the finest vocal performance of his career. His vibrato arrives as a weapon to push through a run or attack a note. His unique phrasing carries the story. He emphasizes the words that carry weight: hot winds, whips, chains. Quote, "I began to take what I did on that stage very seriously. I still like to have fun up there, but I really did mean every word I sang or said. And I wanted people to know that," unquote. Also from Dio's book, Rainbow in the Dark. Then the major scale arrives and his voice lifts with it. The wizard climbs and the voice climbs with him. That line until, no sound as he falls instead of rising. It gives chills. When the wizard finally plummets to his death. And until his death, the wizard himself is barely present in the song. He's simply an evil force, a will imposed on other people from a height they can't reach. Most listeners consider the wizard's death as the song's resolution, but for Dio, the story wasn't over. A Light in the Black continues the story. The slaves are now free, but purpose doesn't arrive with their freedom. They have to find the light of their own. Dio's position in Rainbow was unambiguous. Blackmore's band, Blackmore's terms, absolute from day one. Dio himself said it was, quote, not a very democratic situation at all, unquote. He was the voice of the structure needed without power to shape itself. The man below, the wizard. And every night he stood on a stage and shared his story. People around the band, management, associates, started whispering that the fantastical material was uncommercial. Then bassist Roger Glover joined the band. Glover had been persuaded to sign up partly by hearing Stargazer. He recognized it as a groundbreaking achievement. But shortly after joining, he suggested that Dio try writing love songs. Dio's response, immediate. Quote, I wasn't going to write love songs. It's not what I do. It's not what I ever wanted to do. Unquote. Compromising the mythological themes would mean compromising away from the music he loved to make. Quote, I became well known for what the music press would sometimes chide as my obsession with writing about mythical figures, kings and queens, angels and demons, dungeons and dragons. For me, though, it really suited the kind of epically scaled rock music I'd love to perform. It suited my voice and it suited my imagination. Unquote. That is from Dio's book, Rainbow in the Dark. Then came the magazine incident. Blackmore alone on the cover of Circus. Dio had seen too many members get fired on a whim by Blackmore. He felt less like an equal collaborator and more like a disposable piece of ever-rotating machine. Quote, this was Ritchie Blackmore. He didn't need any help with the music. He just needed someone to write the lyrics and sing them. Unquote. Also Dio. Dio left in 1979. Blackmore replaced him with Graham Bonnet, a singer who came from an R&B background. To break from the article, another element of that, and you kind of hear it on the last or the third Rainbow album, Long Live Rock and Roll, Blackmore really did, along with Roger Glover, wanted to go in a more commercial direction, and that's part of the problem too. And that was quite obvious with the next album, the first to feature Graham Bonnet, a tremendously gifted vocalist himself. But when you have that song, the iconic Since You've Been Gone, that is the direction they wanted to go in. And can you imagine ever trying to hear Dio sing something so pedestrian as compared to what Dio writes? Upon listening to the Dio era material for the first time, Graham Bonnet didn't consider Dio's operatic gymnastics real singing. To him, it was pretend singing, lacking soul. Dear God, what a ridiculous statement. Rainbow pivoted immediately to slicker, softer, radio-ready music. Since You've Been Gone went to number 6 in the UK. Successful, yet forgotten. Not really forgotten. I mean, Since You've Been Gone is still iconic. When Graham Bonnet joined Impellitteri, they did actually their cover of it. To be fair, I can't think of another Graham Bonnet song that is bigger than that. Nothing he did with Alcatraz, Stand in Line by Impellitteri comes to mind, but really that song was kind of the peak of his career, at least in my opinion. Dio spent his final years writing an autobiography he titled Rainbow in the Dark. Not a Dio song, a Rainbow song. The man looked back at the tower he built for someone else and named his life story after it. Stargazer outlasted Rainbow. It outlasted Dio. And it outlasted Blackmore's commercial ambitions. And honestly, that song will outlast us all. See, the wizard fell, but the song still rises. So, again, this was a breakdown of the song Stargazer by Rainbow from Shane O'Neill at The Chug. I will try to remember to link this in the descriptor below. It's a pretty cool little website. I got turned on to it, and it just does deep dives into songs that define heavy metal. So, anyway, thanks for joining me in this video, and I will see you in the next. Later.